Trauma-Informed Care and Intentional Evolution by trauma psychologist Ernie Vecchio.
Really thought-provoking ideas about how we all experience like this break in our spirit at some point.
A break.
Yeah, and he's not just talking about like the huge, like life-altering traumas, but also just those smaller, almost like unnoticeable moments that like chip away at us,
Right. It's like
little cracks.
Yeah, it's like a crack in a piece of pottery or something.
Exactly. Even a small crack can like totally change its structure.
Right. So how would we even recognize this break in ourselves then?
That's a good question.
If it's not always like this big dramatic event,
Yeah, Vecchio describes it as this like feeling of being divided inside. Like we're at war with ourselves.
Yeah.
So think about those times when you feel disconnected or stuck or like you just can't reach your full potential.
Right.
That could be a sign of that underlying break,
Like maybe self-sabotage or always needing validation from other people.
Exactly. Like a seed that could grow, but there's this crack holding it back.
Wow, that's a really powerful image.
Yeah.
So it's not just the big traumas, but also all those tiny things that add up over time.
Exactly.
So then how do we begin to heal from that,
Well, Vecchio really believes that compassion is the key.
Okay, but not just like pity, right?
Right, not pity. He uses the term suffering with.
Suffering with.
Yeah, it's about acknowledging someone's pain without judging them and really being present with them in their struggle.
That sounds really powerful.
It is.
But how do you actually do that,
Well, it's definitely easier said than done. But Vecchio offers this really interesting tool for developing that kind of deep compassion. He calls it the observer.
The observe zone.
It's like developing this inner witness that can observe our experiences and thoughts and emotions without getting like swept up in them,
So it's about creating some distance between yourself and your reactions.
Exactly.
But not like suppressing your emotions.
No, not at all. It's more about learning to observe them with a sense of detachment.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's about cultivating this inner space where you can witness your experiences without judgment, and then you can respond with more clarity and compassion.
So it's like taking a step back from the chaos.
Exactly.
And just observing.
Right, like watching the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions come and go.
This observer idea really reminds me of mindfulness practices.
Yeah,
totally. That idea of just observing your breath or your thoughts without judging them.
Yeah, it's very similar.
So cultivating the observer is kind of like training your mind to be more aware and present.
Exactly, and less reactive.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got compassion is the antidote and the observer is the tool.
Right.
But how does all of this connect to spiritual communities?
Well, spiritual communities can be these amazing spaces where people feel safe enough to explore their pain and start to heal.
Right.
They can foster that sense of suffering with by encouraging open and honest dialogue.
Like support groups or just offering a listening ear.
Exactly.
So it's about creating an atmosphere where it's okay to be vulnerable.
Right, where people feel comfortable sharing their struggles without being judged.
But it seems like it's also about challenging those societal norms that can actually make those breaks worse.
Oh, absolutely.
Those pressures to be perfect and never show weakness.
Right, all the time.
Yeah.
It's like we're constantly being told to be the opposite of compassionate.
Vecchio calls this the collective ego, right?
He does. Yeah, those societal forces that prioritize competition and achievement over things like collaboration and empathy.
So it's like we're fighting a battle on two fronts then.
Yeah, in a way.
Trying to heal our own personal breaks, but also navigating a society that reinforces them.
Exactly. And that's why spiritual communities are so important. They offer a different perspective, a space where compassion and vulnerability are actually celebrated.
It's like a counter-narrative to all those harmful messages we get from society.
Right.
But how can one community, even a really compassionate one, push back against something as big as the collective ego?
It starts with small, consistent actions. Like planting seeds, one seed might not seem like much, but over time those seeds can grow and transform the whole landscape.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So even those small acts of kindness or moments of genuine connection can contribute to a bigger shift.
Exactly. Every act of compassion, every time you truly listen to someone, every effort to create a more supportive space.
But I'm also curious about Vecchio's views on suffering itself.
Oh, yeah.
Because it seems like we're always taught to avoid suffering at all costs.
Right, like it's a bad thing.
But I get the sense that Vecchio might see it differently.
You're right, he does. He challenges us to rethink our whole relationship with suffering.
Really?
Yeah, he suggests that instead of avoiding it, we can learn to embrace it as a chance for growth and transformation.
Embrace suffering.
I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah, most of us spend our lives trying to avoid pain.
Right, but he's not saying to go looking for pain. Of course not.
Right.
He's saying to shift our perspective on the hardships we all go through.
So instead of seeing suffering as like a failure, we can see it as an opportunity to grow and become more resilient
Exactly.
and even more compassionate.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where trauma-informed care comes in. It's about creating spaces where people can safely process their pain, learn from their experiences, and come out stronger on the other side.
Wow. But how do we make this idea of reframing suffering more real for our listeners?
Yeah, good question.
How do we connect it to their own lives?
Well, maybe we can invite them to think about their own experiences with suffering, to think
Yeah.
about a time when they went through something challenging. It could be a big life event or even just a small personal struggle.
Right.
And to ask themselves, what lessons did they learn from that experience?
Yeah.
How did it shape who they are today?
I like that.
Yeah,
It shifts the focus from why me to what can I learn from this?
exactly.
But that brings up another question.
Okay.
How can spiritual communities create spaces where this kind of reflection can happen safely and authentically?
Right. It's not just about being welcoming and supportive.
Yeah, it seems like it goes deeper than that.
It does. It's about weaving these principles of safety and trust and choice and collaboration and empowerment into like the very fabric of the community.
So it's less about trying to fix someone
Exactly.
and more about acknowledging their own unique healing journey.
Exactly. And respecting that journey.
Because that process can look so different for everyone, right?
It can. Some people might find healing in group sharing,
Yeah.
while others might need individual counseling or maybe even art therapy or something.
Right. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. Trauma-informed care recognizes that.
So it sounds like it requires everyone to be really aware and sensitive.
It does.
Yes.
It's not easy.
So how can a spiritual community make sure that its leaders and staff and even just regular members are equipped to create this kind of environment?
That's where training comes in.
Okay.
Investing in training for their members on trauma-informed principles.
So workshops or seminars?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Or even bringing in experts to provide guidance.
It's about making sure everyone is on the same page.
Right. Creating a shared understanding of what trauma is and how to approach it with sensitivity.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And beyond training, there are also specific practices that spiritual communities can adopt.
Like what?
Well, they can start by being mindful of the language they use in sermons and teachings and even just everyday conversations.
Also avoiding triggering language.
Right. And instead emphasizing messages of hope and resilience and connection.
It's about making people feel seen and heard and validated no matter what they've been through.
Exactly. And it's not just about the words we use.
Right. What about the physical space itself?
Yeah, that's important too. Creating a space that feels physically safe and welcoming is crucial.
But I'm also thinking about forgiveness.
Yeah.
Because trauma can leave people feeling so hurt and betrayed and angry.
It can.
How do we deal with those emotions?
Vecchio says forgiveness is a really complex process, especially with trauma.
Right.
And he emphasizes that it's not about condoning the harm or minimizing the pain.
So it's not about letting the person who hurt you off the hook.
No, it's about freeing yourself from the grip of anger and resentment.
Because holding on to that just hurts you more in the end.
Exactly. Forgiveness in this context is about finding a way to let go of those negative emotions and move forward with more peace and compassion.
It's like choosing to break free from the past,
Yeah.
So you can be more present and free in this moment.
And it's important to remember that forgiveness is a process, not a destination.
Right. It takes time and patience and a lot of inner work.
It does. And there might be setbacks, moments when the anger or resentment comes back.
Well,
It's about being gentle with yourself and honoring those feelings while still staying committed to healing. Even when things feel broken, our capacity for healing is still there.